It is with great honor and excitement that I present to you today's first keynote speaker, NASA astronaut Zena Cardman. As a marine scientist turned NASA astronaut Zena exemplifies the curiosity and explorative nature of the Technovation girls community. Zena grew up in Virginia and received a Bachelor's of Science in Biology and a Master's of Science in Marine Sciences from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. As a student and research scientist, she researched microbial systems in extreme and unusual environments like Antarctica. Zena then changed her focus from exploring the Earth's waters to exploring space. In 2017, Zena was selected to join the Turtles astronaut class and completed 2 years of training as an astronaut candidate. Zena is now awaiting her mission assignment and is helping NASA prepare for the Artemis missions, which will land the first woman and the first person of color on the moon. When asked why she wanted to be an astronaut, Zena said that working on large, impactful science missions in space with a team is what she really looked forward to. Zena, your curiosity, bravery to explore the unknown, determination to advance science and engineering, and emphasis on teamwork are all reasons why you are such an incredible role model to the Technovation girls community. We are so honored to have you here today. So without further ado, I present to you Zena.
Thank you so much for that incredibly warm welcome. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so excited for all of your questions after this. I just wanted to start right into it, introduce myself. My name is Zena, and really thrilled to be talking with you guys today. I'm actually going to start my presentation here at the toilet on Axel Heiberg Island. This is an island in the Canadian high Arctic. It's at about 80 degrees north latitude, not too far from the actual literal North Pole. This toilet is a rusting old fuel barrel with a plastic seat stuck on top. It's a pretty intimidating toilet to walk up to, but if you sit on it, you are rewarded with what I would argue is one of the best views of any toilet in the world. You can go to the next slide. This is the view from the toilet on Axel Heiberg Island in the Canadian high Arctic. It is just absolutely breathtakingly beautiful and, in my opinion, totally otherworldly, which is exactly why I was there. I was there with a group of NASA scientists to study life that lives in springs that come up liquid year-round, even when it's minus 40 or plus 15 degrees. And it's actually a great analog for what we think we might find on Mars and some of the features that look like running water on Mars. You can go to the next slide. And I spent a lot of my time with the scientists there in really smelly mud and digging holes underground. This is a common theme in my life, I think you'll find. But just to back up a little bit and tell you how I got here in the first place, I had just finished my first year as a university student, so not much older than a lot of you watching today. And when I was an undergrad, I wasn't necessarily always the best in the classroom. I was really bad at memorizing stuff. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, but I read about another student who had gone to Antarctica, and I just got absolutely obsessed with this idea of going to polar regions. And so that year, I set about emailing every single person I could find on the internet who was doing research in Antarctica and introducing myself, saying, "Hey, my name is Zena. I'm an undergrad. I have no experience. Take me with you, please." Most of these people never actually wrote back to me. Most who did said no, but eventually I did wind up actually going to Antarctica a few years later. You can go to the next slide. And this was such an absolute treat. I fell in love with this environment. I absolutely loved the wildlife there, the scenery. It's another really incredible place that's changing really rapidly with changing climate. But I always absolutely loved working with the teams of people who were there. And this was kind of the kickoff for my career as a scientist, studying places that are really difficult for people to live, but actually a lot of organisms, especially microorganisms, thrive there. I studied, on the next slide, you can see places like deep sea hydrothermal vents, places that are permanently in the dark that you need a submarine to get to. These are really hot environments, so kind of the other end of the temperature spectrum from Antarctica. And I also spent a while studying life that lives underground in caves. You can go to the next slide for that photo. Again, just life that lives permanently in the darkness. Spent a lot of time crawling around in mud in my past career. But again, if you go to the next slide, in all of these fieldwork opportunities, all of these big research projects, what I absolutely loved the most was working in teams, working with other people. And to get this stuff done, it takes not just the scientists who are doing research, but also a lot of logistics people, engineers, electricians, plumbers, cooks, people who really make it happen and make the whole experience really, really fun and just incredible bonding experience. And so that's really ultimately why I applied to be an astronaut in 2017. You can see my classmates on the next slide. These are the turtles, my classmates. 2017 is when we started our job. We're not the newest class anymore, actually. Now we have the flies following us. But my classmates have just started flying to space. It's so exciting to see them actually fly. And right now we're flying to the International Space Station. Next slide. This is an incredible floating, orbiting laboratory that's about 250 miles above Earth. And it's incredible, the research that we do there all the time. But in order to do research there, you have to do a lot of training so that you can operate safely, effectively. Training to be an astronaut means learning a lot of engineering systems. Next slide, please. We learn all of the parts of the International Space Station and how to operate them when things are going well. And also, you can see on the right, in emergency situations, if there were a fire on the space station, for example. And next slide. We also learn how to operate robotics. So we have a giant robotic arm that we can use to capture cargo vehicles on the left or on the right. You can see we use this arm also to fly around our friends during spacewalks, which is really fun. Next slide, please. We also learn how to fly planes. This is a T-38 jet. It's supersonic, but barely. But flying these planes is just such good preparation for flying in space. It's one of the only training platforms that we have where all of the forces that you feel are real, the risks are real, and it takes a lot of teamwork, a lot of discipline, and really knowing how to operate something and knowing its systems really well, knowing what to do in case something goes wrong. It's one of my absolute favorite training platforms. And we also use these T-38 jets. You can go to the next slide, please. We use these as a way to train maintenance. And so this is the underside of a T-38 jet, and we learn how to repair them, how to replace parts. And this is really good training for the International Space Station because stuff breaks on the International Space Station all the time, and you can't just call an electrician or a plumber if you go to the next slide. This is the toilet on the International Space Station. Weird toilets in weird places, I think, is a common theme in my life. But knowing how to repair these things is really, really critical if you're going to stay there for 6 months or a year and not only do science, but also live in this place. A lot of what we do, though, is research. That's really the reason the International Space Station exists. You can go to the next slide. It's a national laboratory. We do all kinds of really unique research that can only be done in an environment where you are weightless all the time. We do really cool microbiology, cell biology research. We can actually grow organisms, 3D print organs in space. Amazing. We can grow crystals in a way that you really can't here on Earth. We do lots of science on the human body and how the human body is affected. And so this is a great way to learn about osteoporosis, bone density loss. So we study ourselves as well. We also learn how to grow crops. This is so that we know how to feed ourselves when we start going farther and farther afield, eventually to a place like Mars. And next slide, please. We also train to do spacewalking, and this is for both repairs and for science. We use a giant swimming pool. It's called the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, and underwater in this swimming pool is a huge mock-up, a 1-to-1 scale mock-up of the International Space Station. And to do a spacewalk in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, you can go to the next slide. We get suited up in a spacesuit that really gets pressurized. It's actually like the real spacesuit. It takes a lot of help here on Earth because it weighs 300 pounds here on Earth. But you get in your outfit and get buttoned up and put in the water, and then you get to work. This is one of the coolest things that we get to do as an astronaut, but it's also one of the hardest. When I first started learning spacewalking, I was super duper not good at it. I'm going to show you a video next. Just to introduce what's going on here, EV1 and EV2 are what we call spacewalkers. You always do a spacewalk with a buddy, and so you have number 1 and number 2. And then I'll also mention BRT, we call it. It's the body restraint tether, and this is basically like a big flexible tripod, but for your whole body with a little grabber arm at the end. And so without further ado, I hope you guys find this as funny as I do. I'm going to let you watch one of my very first
and EV2 has
fails.
BRT down, but once again, not able to rotate the collar in either direction. EV1 has BRT down, but not in a very good position.
Just absolutely stuck and can't get back to where we're supposed to be.
You are kind of in a weird spot.
All of our instructors are laughing at us.
Oh boy.
It was really uncomfortable.
Did you happen to put down a local tether when you first got to your work site?
Negative.
All right.
Check minus.
I very much regret that decision.
And if you absolutely can't figure out how to get yourself back down, it looks like you got it, though.
Yeah, thank goodness.
It looks like you've got yourself in a much better config now.
Yes, I will local tether at this time.
Copy.
Lessons learned. So I like to watch this video from time to time just to remember how far we've come since our very early days. You can go to the next slide. We get a lot of practice doing this stuff, and it takes many, many hours before it starts to feel a little bit more natural. But we have to really get through that hard part in order to do it well and do it safely. And that's because on the next slide where we're going is the International Space Station. And we do spacewalks outside the International Space Station, not just for repairs, but also for science. You can go to the next slide, please. We actually just recently had the first all-female spacewalk. So these are my colleagues, Jessica and Christina, repairing basically a part of the electrical system on the International Space Station. We get our power from the sun, solar arrays, and they were fixing a really critical piece of equipment that had failed unexpectedly. And on the next slide, you can see Jessica and Christina preparing for their spacewalk. Pretty awesome to get to do that teamwork thing together. And on the next slide, you can see also some of the other stuff that we do on spacewalks. This is a world-class particle detector, antimatter detector called AMS, alpha magnetic spectrometer. And so we're not just repairing batteries or pieces of equipment, but we're also working on science equipment, research projects that are mounted on the exterior of the space station. Really, really cool. And so you can go to the next slide too. We do a lot of science here on Earth as well. We've started adding geology training to our astronaut training, which is super fun and makes me feel right at home given my background. But whether you were an engineer or a pilot or a scientist like me, you learn geology as an astronaut. And we also learn how to work with special geology tools you can see on the next slide. These are tools that are for collecting samples on a place like the moon, but that they work really well with those big spacesuits that you saw a couple slides back. And you can see in the next slide some of the ways that we're practicing how to do that. And this is because we're getting ready to go to the moon. Like we mentioned in the introduction, the Artemis missions will take us back to the moon, but back sustainably and going places that we've never been on the moon before that are going to be really hard to get to, but really interesting scientifically. And so now we have to learn how to use spacesuits that are for walking as opposed to climbing around on the exterior of the space station, more like a jungle gym. And next slide. It's just such a fun and amazing and humbling time to be an astronaut. I'm so excited. We have all of these different options for missions, for vehicles that we might fly on, whether that's a vehicle like the Dragon by SpaceX or Soyuz, or eventually something that's taking us to the moon. That's my classmate Kayla in the top middle there in one of the suits that we will use for launching on our way to the moon. And so, speaking of the moon, I'll just leave that as our last slide here. I'm so excited to take your questions and just really thrilled to be here, really, really humbled to be part of this program as we're getting ready to go farther and farther afield. And with that, I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Zena. I mean, someone wrote in the chat and they said, my floor has not, or my jaw has not come up from the floor this entire presentation. And I think all of us can relate to that. Okay, so now we will have about 9 to 10 minutes to ask some questions to Zena. So if anybody wants to put them in the comments, I will go ahead and put them on screen and have Zena answer. Brittany T just says, thank you for sharing with us. This was amazing. Totally.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for being a great audience. I love seeing the comments. This is awesome.
Awesome. So while we wait, we actually had some questions from Instagram that we asked the other day.
Cool.
So,
excellent.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start with those. And then as we continue, the crowd continues to think of some questions. You can put that in there, but let's start with these. So the first question that we have is from Anika, and this is something that you probably already answered in your presentation, but she just wanted to know, what was something that was really challenging and what was something that was really exciting during your training? We know something.
Yeah, we have lots of challenges. A lot of the things that we do that are really challenging are also really fun, and so that helps a lot. Of course, I talked about the spacewalk training. That to me was just one of the hardest things to do, both physically and mentally. I mean, the physical challenge of it, it's hard to operate in a suit that's pressurized. You can imagine the feeling of moving the glove is like squeezing a tennis ball over and over for like 6.5 hours. So it's a physical challenge, but it's also a mental challenge, not being able to use your body really like you're used to. It's more like driving a vehicle than wearing an outfit, if that makes sense. Other challenges, we get to learn a language for part of our job. We learn Russian because we share the International Space Station with cosmonauts. And so having to learn a language as an adult is a huge privilege, but also a giant challenge. I'm sure lots of people can relate to that, but the most fun part of it for me is just getting to know my other classmates and my colleagues. I was kind of afraid that maybe people would be really competitive, type A, but actually everyone that I work with here is so collaborative. We help each other study, we lift each other up. It's just been such a pleasure to learn how to be an astronaut with these people who now feel not just like colleagues, but real friends, family.
Course, that's so awesome. Okay, we have our next question from Andy, and she would like to know, what can you tell to our girls who want to be like you?
Oh gosh, I think for me, trying to pick a path to go down was hard. I mean, there are so many options in the world, but it really helped me to find somebody who was not too much older than myself and use them as a role model and start to kind of follow the things that they were doing. And that was a jumping off point, and I could kind of improvise from there and find opportunities that really felt right for me. Finding a mentor who was further along in their career, who was willing to work one-on-one with me and help open some doors, help answer questions when I wasn't sure what decision to make. That was really helpful too. And then the other big thing is just don't be your own worst enemy. Don't be the first person to tell yourself, no, you can't do something. Don't wait for somebody to say that you're smart enough or good enough or you've been in school long enough. Just go pursue whatever opportunity interests you, and you'll be surprised, I think, at the doors that open.
Love that so much. Thank you, Zena. Moving on, so we have Esther, and I think this is a great question, and I think a lot of girls are probably wondering, tell us your experience as a woman, if it was different from that of your colleagues, and if you just have any advice for being a woman entering STEM.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, I only have my own experience, so it's hard to say how different it is for other people. I'm really, really happy to be working in an astronaut office that is so diverse. Unlike the astronaut office of the 1960s, we represent our country, we represent the diversity of the world much better. And so if you pick a crew of 4 people from anyone in our office, it's now just statistically likely that you'll get this diversity. And that just warms my heart, because I hope that we will be able to influence the next generation based on what they're able to see. I think some of the most important things about being a woman in STEM is to just remember to lift each other up, be an advocate for the other people going through this. It can be easy to maybe start to feel competitive with other people who fill the same niche that you want to be filling, but it actually goes so much better if you're just an advocate for each other, people who are like you, people who are different from you. I think that makes us all stronger together.
That's wonderful. Yes. One person, one female's success is all of our success. And that's what we say a lot.
Totally agree.
That's awesome. We have another question from Sahana. What kind of projects do you work on abroad the International Space Station?
Yeah, we get to work on a lot of different projects. That's one of the coolest parts, in my opinion, about being an astronaut, is I'm no longer doing my own research, but I get to be the eyes and ears and lab notebook for so many different projects. I always wanted to be part of something that was much bigger than myself, and this is just an amazing opportunity to do that. We do lots of different kinds of research. A lot of it is biology, whether that's research on the human body using astronauts as the subjects, of course. We do a lot of plant biology, cell biology, and it's just really interesting to be able to grow stuff in a weightless environment. We can also do things like study how flames work, because they just behave in a way that we don't really get to observe here on Earth, where we have the effects of convection and other Earth processes that we're familiar with. And so you can do some really cool physics experiments on the International Space Station, but it's something different every day. You might be scheduled for physics in the morning and cell biology in the afternoon and do some repairs on the toilet in between. It's a really, really cool thing.
That's so great and so exciting. And I'm sure so many things are going to come out of your research. We're all excited to see that.
Me too. Thanks.
Oh, and I'm not sure if you can share, but Veronica is asking, are you going on any of the missions that are about to happen, like Artemis?
Yeah, so nobody is assigned yet to the Artemis missions. We're really hoping actually within the next month to see Artemis 1 launch. That rocket is not going to have any people on it. It's an uncrewed test flight of the vehicle. But the next flight after that will have people on it. Artemis 2 will take astronauts around the moon and back, sort of like Apollo 8. And I can't wait to find out who's going to be on that. So you'll have to stay tuned, just like me.
We're going to stay tuned. We definitely will. And this is more of a general, kind of a broader topic, but what do you see in the future of space exploration?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we're working on right now is, we've gotten pretty good at low Earth orbit. So the International Space Station goes around the Earth 250 miles up. But now we want to know how to go farther, but stay for a similarly long duration. We've been to the moon before, but we would go for a few days at a time. And having the experience is really valuable, but we just don't know what it's going to be like for the human body to be there for a few weeks, more than a month. So the next step is to go to the moon, which is 250,000 miles away compared to 250 miles up. And it's also really important that we do that before we go onward to Mars, which is another order of magnitude even further. And I can't wait to see us set up a base, really doing a lot of science. I am so excited for the geology and the earth science that we're going to get to do from the moon, actually. It's such a good place to study Earth because it was made, basically at the same time as the Earth, geologically speaking. It's made of the same stuff that the Earth is. But unlike Earth, there's not all this biology growing on the surface. And so it's kind of like a time capsule of how Earth was 4.5 billion years ago. And the few rocks that we got during Apollo told us so much about our solar system, about our planet. And now we have 2022 technology, really cool scientific updates, and we're getting ready to get so many more rocks. I can't wait.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Rocks have never been more exciting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. They were so great. And thank you so much, Zena, for that extremely inspirational talk. We wish you all the best in all your endeavors out of space and on Earth. And I will introduce our next event. Thank you so much, Zena.
Thank you all so much. It was great to meet you. Thanks for the questions.
Bye.